Nemesis.
Darunia, a once great world of wonder and fantasy, has fallen into ruin. Evil entities have conquered and enthralled the land's greatest champions in their efforts to control the multiverse. With Darunia firmly in their grasp, these entities have set their sights on a new world, yours. Gather unlikely allies and stand your ground against an onslaught of bloodthirsty minions and a ravenous evil.
Alright everyone, this is Ed Rodriguez, creator of the Animus draft building card game, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to play the expansion sets, beginning with expansion set 1, Nemesis. The expansion set will allow you to play Animus solo or cooperatively with other players, and it includes a bunch of new materials that are very similar to the base game but also very different. So you get everything that you see here except this nifty playmat. This is a rubber playmat that is sold separately, but it is available. You can get a copy of that yourself, but it's mostly usable for when you're playing solo, not really multiplayer, and as you'll see in a minute. So anyway, what do you get in here? So you get these large Nemesis cards. They're very similar to the entity cards in the base game, but these have different backs, and the backs can be used as a reference, which we'll get into later. So these are enemy characters that you're going to be facing off, and then they have a deck of minion cards, which are very similar to the character cards for the players, but these are just for the enemy, the Nemesis. They summon minions and they have different card backs. These don't get shuffled with the other ones. Now, I'm going to assume that you know the rules of the base game before delving into this, so you should be familiar with that. If you're not, you should watch that video. But anyway, there's 36 minion cards, and just like any other Animus set, every single card has a unique special ability that is not shared among other cards. So there's always going to be some variety. Of course, you come with a rule booklet in the box, and some new damage tokens. Unfortunately, there are not new dice, because you have dice already in the base set, and if it's not clear, you do need to have a base set, or what we call core set. You need to have at least one core set in order to play this. So it is an expansion set, and this is just adding on stuff. I'm going to show you how to play solo, but it easily expands to multiple players, as you'll see. So in the game, you're going to be playing against Nemesis, and the Nemesis is actually going to function like another player, except a lot of the things they're going to do is automated. So like in the normal game, you're going to have your entity. Again, like the normal game, you're going to have your choice of one of two, but you've made your choice. You get your entity, you're going to put it out there. And the way the drafting for solo and multiplayer is gonna work is, instead of having the array like in the two-player game, you're just gonna draw, shuffle up the character cards. You're gonna draw 3, and one of those you're gonna keep for yourself and discard the others, and then draw 3 more and keep on like that. If you run out of cards to draw, the discards get shuffled and create a new draft pile. So very simply, you're just gonna draft that way. Now, but before you draft, you will know what Nemesis you're facing. So you're gonna take all the Nemesis cards. You're gonna go ahead and shuffle them up, and you're gonna randomly select one. There's no choice. You're just gonna select one, and that's the one that you're gonna play against. So that's the setup. You randomly drew one, then you select your entity. So you may want to select your entity based on what Nemesis you're facing, and then you draft your cards. Now the Nemesis does not draft. You're gonna take the minions deck, and very simply, you're just gonna shuffle it up and randomly draw 9 cards. You never look at them. You don't know what the Nemesis is gonna have. The Nemesis is gonna have a deck of 9 random cards, and that's their deck, and then the rest are not going to be used in that game. When you have multiple players, the Nemesis will still only have one deck, but they're going to draw 9 cards per player in the game. So in a 2-player game, the Nemesis will have 18 cards in their draw deck. Just like any game of Animus, you're playing to one player has 10 points in their discard pile. So if the player has 10 points in the discard pile, they're going to lose. If you can manage to kill 10 points of the Nemesis's minions, then you're going to win. Now, that point total will increase by 5 for each additional player beyond the first. So if you're playing 2 players, then you're playing to a total of 15 points. Now, the Nemesis only has 1 discard pile that is going to be continually added to. However, the players have their own discard piles and their totals will be added together. So if I have 7 in my discard pile and my friend has 7 in the discard pile, we're at 7 points, well, or rather 14 points, we're 1 away from losing the game. Another big difference when you're playing against the Nemesis is that there is a new sort of phase. The Nemesis is always going to take a turn before each player. So if we're playing a solo game, before I even do anything, I've drafted my deck, I'm all set up, ready to go, just like any other regular game. The Nemesis is going to take the first turn. The first thing you do at their turn is you check to see if there's any start effects. The Nemesis often does have start of turn effects, so you check for those. Now, one thing to keep in mind, a very general rule of thumb, almost everything with the Nemesis and their cards starts from front to back, left to right. Always remember that, and you'll always be able to, manage everything. So we check start of turn, front to back, left to right, and there's nothing. We continue, otherwise we resolve them. Next, the Nemesis has 1 tactical phase, and their tactical phase consists of basically only one thing they're going to do. They're going to take the top card of their deck and they're going to play it. Just like a player, they must put a card into melee position. This is their melee position before they can put it into one of their flank positions, and they also have 2 support positions. Those work just the same like any other player. The difference, a big difference here, is that later on when they have to play more cards, they always play front to back, left to right. So the first card would go into melee position. Their next card will always go into the left flank position. Their third card eventually would be in the right flank, and then later on into the left support, and then the right support. They always play in that order. Now, let's say somewhere in there, let's say one of these cards gets killed. So we have a setup here, and this gunslinger, you eliminate it. The next card that it would play would go into this position because that's the next one that's open. Like any other player, cards do slide up. So if the Nemesis happens to have a card here and during combat you kill this paladin in here, again, front to back, left to right, so this Conjurer will be the one to move up. After the Nemesis does their tactical phase, which basically consists of them just playing 1 card and then checking if there's any effects from the cards, then you go into the combat phase. So during the Nemesis combat phase, all their cards will attack, or they'll attempt to attack. Now, the Nemesis does play a little bit dumb. It's going to attack whether it's advantageous for them or not. So they may bumble into bad situations, but they are usually more powerful than players' cards, so bear that in mind. All right, just like everything else we've mentioned, you resolve attacks front to back, left to right. So in this example here, this paladin would attack first. Now, they also always attack in a direct line if possible. So the paladin will almost always do a melee attack against your melee position here. The flank ones will also choose to try to do a straight attack directly across if they can. Again, whether it's good for them or not, that's what they're gonna do. They're gonna do a straight attack. Now, let's say I don't have any cards on the left here, and the Nemesis wants to attack me. Well, then in that case, it'll attack the card that it can. So since Fate is the only one there, it will attack that. And again, it doesn't, depending on which side it is, just like in a 2-player game, the flank ones can't like reach across the table, so they can only attack their side of the board. All right, then after the Nemesis has done all their combat, they just go right into the end phase. There's no second tactical phase for them like a player. They play a card, do their combat, and then they end their turn. During that end phase, though, you do check the discard piles to see if one player wins. So the Nemesis could win on their turn. After the Nemesis ends their turn, then it goes into the player's turn, and the player's turn functions just like any other Animus set. You have your tactical and combat phases, you play your cards, you have your positions. One difference is that as a player, you have the option to switch your cards more often to better fit the situation. The Nemesis very rarely switches cards. That's usually because of some special ability, but you play your turn as normal, and then you go into, when you finish your turn, then it'll go back to Nemesis turn. Even if there's another player in the game, the Nemesis again takes a turn right before every player. Now, a quick side note, the Nemesis does not have a hand of cards like a player normally would, although there are some cards that affect a player's hand that you can use against the Nemesis. In this case, if you're affecting the Nemesis hand, the top 3 cards of their discard pile is considered their hand. So if some card lets me look at it, you just draw the top 3 and do whatever your effect is letting you do. And then if any cards that are getting returned to the top of the deck will get randomized and then put to the top. So that's how you handle the Nemesis's hand. Now, I mentioned that you can play cooperatively with up to a total of 4 players. Now, not much changes, because what happens is every single player is going to have a setup like this in front of them. They have their own cards, and then there's going to be a Nemesis play area in front of them. So if I'm player 1, I'm going to have this, and the Nemesis is going to be there and cards there. And then player 2 is going to have their own area off to the side in front of them with, again, they won't have the Nemesis, but they'll have cards. Now, the thing that does change is during the end phase of a turn, if I was doing my turn here, when the player finishes their turn, whatever Nemesis is in front of them is going to move over in front of the next player. So you're going to use the Nemesis as sort of a turn counter. So beginning of game, the Nemesis starts, does its thing, then I go, I'll play my turn, then my turn ends, I'll take the Nemesis and put it in front of player 2, and now player 2 is going to, well, rather the Nemesis is going to take a turn before player 2, and then player 2 will get to do everything that they want to do, and then the Nemesis will move from in front of them to player 3, and so on and so forth. So you can play up to 4 players that way. Now, if you're a veteran of the game and you want a little bit more difficulty, because again, the Nemesis does attack kind of in a dumb way, although like I said, their abilities make up for it, they do attack kind of in dumb ways and it's predictable. If you want more of a challenge, there is a hard mode that you can play, and it's actually very simple to apply. Instead of facing 1 Nemesis card, you will face 2. Draw 2 random ones and you'll face them both, and both their effects are going to be considered to be active at the same time. If you're playing multiplayer and you want to play hard mode, then it's a little bit different. What you do is that each player will randomly draw a Nemesis, and that Nemesis will be in front of them, and it'll stay in front of them rather than moving it around the table like we did before. Each player will have only 1 in front of them. However, all of them are still considered to be in play and active. It's just by having it in front of you, that player can be the one to sort of remind the other players, hey, this Nemesis does something even on your turn. There is a special solo mode that you can play called the Evolution mode, and this mode turns the game into a roguelike legacy game. And what's going to happen is the actions that you're going to play multiple games, and the actions in one game is going to kind of affect the outcome of your other games. And it's very simple. What you're going to do is you're going to select the entity rather than randomly drawing them like before. When you play in evolution mode, you can pick any entity you want. Like, you know what, I want to play as a fallen angel, that'll be my entity. However, for every game you have to stay with that entity. All right, now if you lose a game, you're going to lose your entity. Your entity actually gets defeated, and you cannot use it for the rest of this. It's like a campaign mode. You're not going to be able to use it for the rest of that campaign, but you can pick and choose which other entity you want. So it's not that big of a deal. The bigger deal is that Remember, in any game, even when you're playing well, some of your cards are going to get killed, right? There are some effects that ban cards from in play. They get banished from the game. So at the end of a game that you win, any cards that are killed, that are in your discard pile killed or have been banned, get removed from the game for the rest of that campaign. So that means your future drafts, you're going to actually have slightly less options. So during the campaign, it's like a marathon. You want to try to preserve your cards, because every card that gets killed is going to be permanently dead and removed. Same thing with your entities. However, the same does not hold true for the Nemesis. The Nemesis cards, when you kill them, they may come back. And the thematic reason for this is that players' cards, the cards that they play, are actually characters with unique names, right? They're named characters, whereas the cards, the minions that the Nemesis uses, they're not named characters. They're sort of generic roles, like this is a paladin, conjurer, ranger. So they don't represent sort of just a unique individual, but more of an archetype. So the roguelite, you're just going to be playing against the Nemesis over game after game, and your options are little by little going to become fewer and fewer, whereas the Nemesis doesn't change. So the difficulty will kind of ramp up. Now the base goal is you want to try to win 4 games. You want to defeat 4 different Nemesis. And if I didn't mention that, if you win a game against a Nemesis in evolution mode, that Nemesis is removed from the game as well, and you will not face that one again, and you'll face a different one in the next game. Your base goal is to defeat at least 4 Nemesis to consider a win, and hey, you won. But if you really want a challenge, try to defeat all 6 of the opposing Nemesis with just the cards that you have. And if you can do that, then you can consider yourself an expert at winning a full evolution campaign. Mind you, as you add more sets and more expansion sets, you're going to be able to make this campaign longer and longer, more diverse. So there's also that to look forward to. So that's it. That's all you really need to know to be able to play with the expansion sets. They integrate very easily. And again, it's kind of nice that you can play solo on your own, play out through the campaign, or jump in with a bunch of other players and have at it. It is, it is not quite as deeply strategic as maybe the 2-player game, because you're playing a live opponent, but it is very puzzle-like as you're trying to figure out what the best moves to do on your turn to have the maximum outcome. So if you like min-maxing, you're gonna like this. So hopefully this is interesting to you and you'd like to check it out. If so, check out the link below, animuscardgame.com, and get your copy today. And don't forget that you can pick up this game mat along with it.